What makes Harvard and Stanford and Princeton and UPenn, what makes them so valuable? Maybe it's the quality of education you get there, but I'd argue more people go there because of what happens when you get Harvard on your college degree.
Right.
Harvard is a great place to be from. What if more organizations tried to build themselves as great places to be from? What if by having your organization on someone's resume, they could open any door in your industry, any door in that field? And now all of a sudden you're creating this network of global brand ambassadors. But for working at your company, they would never have this dream job of theirs. How much loyalty and admiration and love do they have for your company? How likely are they to sing your praises to people that they meet? Because according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, people stay at an organization between 2 and 4 years, and it's trending more towards the 2. So people are going to leave.
Well, I am super excited to be here today to interview my next guest. He is recognized as an expert on performance and is a keynote speaker and the founder of Global Performance Institute. He leads sales and marketing teams by day, and then by night, he entertains as a dueling pianist. He's the creator of the tip jar culture, and he likes to teach to take the irk out of work. So I am so excited to welcome to the Professional Rule Breaker podcast, Gregory Offner.
Hey, Kathy, how are you?
I am just doing great and excited. So excited because we're a bit of a kindred spirit. So I'm super excited to have you on my show. So I want to say first off, because knowing that you're a creative, you're a dueling pianist, how on earth did you ever get into keynote speaking and leading sales team and that whole corporate type of world? Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting transition actually out of leading sales teams in the dueling piano world and into the world of professional speaking. And most people, when they hear about that transition, don't really see the connection. The transition catalyst was losing my voice. I
Really?
know. So most people go, wait, you lost your voice and then decided to speak professionally for a living? Like, how does that work? So I had this day job leading sales teams and marketing efforts for companies, all around the world. And I had a night job as a dueling piano player. Now, the day job paid the bills financially, and the night job sort of paid those emotional bills. It really filled me up and helped me do what I love in the world, which is to entertain and to see other people enjoying their experience. But in the process of using my voice all day and all night long and probably smoking cigarettes and drinking lots of Jack Daniels didn't help my case.
Yes.
I developed some vocal cord injuries. And in 2015, those injuries became so pernicious and persistent and severe that my vocal cords became paralyzed. This is the response to vocal cord injury. And doctors said that at that point, my days of professional performance was behind me, that I should just consider myself a former professional singer because my vocal cords were so badly damaged that my singing voice would never be the same. But they also said that if I didn't take immediate and massive action, I would lose the ability to speak as well, that my vocal cord paralysis would become permanent, meaning I would never speak again.
Wow.
And in that moment, when I received that diagnosis, I had to make a decision. I had to decide to quit smoking, to completely change my eating and drinking and lifestyle habits. And I had to decide whether or not I was going to undergo surgery. I mean, surgery on your vocal cords is a coin toss in some cases.
Right. It's a pretty scary thing.
It's a big deal. I mean, when I went into the operating room for the first of 15 surgeries that I'd go on to have over the better part of a decade, that first time when I got wheeled in, right before I went in, they said to my wife, then my girlfriend, I said, all right, love you. See you in a little bit. And as they rolled me back, I realized that if this didn't go well, that might be the last time she ever heard my voice. That moment changed me. And in those months and years that followed, the inability to use my voice as I had become accustomed to using it really started to eat at me. And I fell into a deep depression. I mean, at one point I had thoughts of suicide.
Wow.
Because I was so wrapped up in my voice as my identity as a singer, as a professional communicator. I didn't see a path on the other side if I didn't get my voice back. Now, I'm lucky for two main reasons. One, because I worked with the best team in the world, and I still continue to work with this voice team. And they have helped me repair and rebuild and rejuvenate my vocal cords. I'm not back to where I was, pre all these injuries, but I'm in a place right now where I can sing a little bit and I can speak a little bit. But if it weren't for that vocal cord injury, the second reason I say I'm lucky is that I would have kept on chugging along, doing a job that I kind of liked during the day. It was okay. I mean, the money was great, but like the experience, there were days when I'd drive to work and think it wouldn't be that bad if I got into a car accident that was severe enough that I didn't have to go to work. I mean, not so bad that I'm like really injured, but bad enough that my boss would go,
It's like
hey,
the
it's
golden
okay.
handcuffs.
Don't worry about your quota for the quarter. It just heal up, buddy.
Right.
That was my daily experience. And if I'm honest, even the work I did at the piano bar was selling myself short of what I really hoped I could accomplish musically. I lived in this space where I was avoiding outcomes I didn't want instead of taking the chances and the actions that are required to get the results that I did want. And if it weren't for that vocal cord injury, I never would have decided to make the change. Because coming out on the other side of that, I said, you know what? I already saw what life looked like once, thinking that I was going to effectively, right, metaphorically die with all of these words and hopes and aspirations inside of me. I'm never going to take that chance again. Even if I fall flat on my face, I fail, I have to sell the house, figure out a whole new way of living, I'm going to try. And I decided to try the world of keynote speaking. I was actually pushed in this direction by a mentor, a stranger that I met at an event as I was recovering. I told you I was in pretty deep depression.
Right.
And I said, well, why not go to a Tony Robbins event?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, most people would go to therapy for depression, but no, I said, hey, Tony Robbins, that's my guy.
I personally love Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins has actually similar challenges to you because he's having major vocal issues as well. I guess his vocal cords are, a tenth of the size that they should be because of all the speaking that he has done. That's been, if you've ever gone to one of his events, for the people that are listening out there, it's not just for, 5 hours, 8 hours. You go and you're going for 12, 15 hours and he's talking the whole entire time. So he obviously did a lot to his vocal cords. Yes.
Yeah. And so at that event, I met someone standing in line for the concession stand. Her name is Svetlana. She was in front of me. I was behind her. She turned around and said, hey, I'm Svetlana. I said, hey, I'm Greg. She said, how many times have you come to this event? I said, this is my first time. She said, oh. I said, how about you? She said, this is my 10th. I said, 10 times. Wow. And she proceeded to tell me why she was drawn to these events, what she got out of them, and her backstory. And it was unbelievable. I mean, what this woman has accomplished and overcome in her life was just mesmerizing. And as she wrapped up her story, she said, what about you, Greg? What's your story? Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where somebody tells you a story and you can't one-up it. So you're just like, I don't want to go next, But that's how I felt. And I said, I don't know. Let's not talk about me. But she pushed. And I thought, you know what? I don't know this person. I'll probably never see her again. So I'm not going to give her the story that I think will make me sound good. I'm going to give her the whole truth. And I laid it on this poor woman. I shared how unhappy I was and how lost I felt. And as I was wrapping up this, what I felt like was a sob story, she's smiling. I could see like a twinkle in her eye. And she says, Greg, you don't see it, do you? I said, see what? She said, well, you're telling me this story about your life and all these gifts and interests that you have, like the gift of music and your interest in psychology, and you're clearly good at sales and you've got passions here and interests there. And she said, but it sounds like you're trying to keep them all in separate spaces, in buckets. And I just wonder what it would look like if you dumped all of those passions and interests into one bucket. I never thought of it that way. And I said, I have no idea what that would look like. But from the smile on your face, I'm guessing you do.
I do. I absolutely understand that.
And so she kind of positioned me towards the stage, put her hand on my shoulder, and she pointed up where Tony had been speaking just moments earlier. We were on a break at the time. And she goes, I think that's where you'd find yourself. And I get chills sharing that story because it was like a bolt of lightning hit me in the head. Mm-hmm. I couldn't understand why I'd never thought of that before. And that's the value of coaches and mentors, is they see what we don't see. You know, I mean, in the sales work you do, you see what organizations can't see, because it's
absolutely,
what's the saying? It's hard to read the label from inside the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Svetlana helped read my label. And because of her, I now get the privilege to speak to audiences and to organizations all over the world. And as you mentioned in the intro, I help these individuals and these organizations, at least I try to, help them take the irk out of work.
Yes, yes. So I know one of the things, because I did my research, and I love something that you said and that you kind of focused on, is the focus of a lot of organizations is on growth. Like, it always is on growth. And especially in this month, the month of January. So in the month of January, for many of you that are maybe have never been in the corporate world, there's always a huge push. There's giant meetings, and it's all about sales and what we're rolling out, and the sales that are going to be necessary for this particular year. And it's all about growth. And sometimes, the focus is only about the growth, and the employees, the salespeople, the folks that work are more on the, I would say, on the surface. You have to help with the growth, but there's not so much growth, focus on the actual employee or the actual salesperson. And I think that, because from something I read, isn't that something that you kind of focus on messaging wise, as far as how important it is to grow your people?
Well, yeah, I think that the most dangerous thing that an organization can acclimate to, right, can get used to, mm-hmm. is having the same people return to work each day.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is
doing the same thing.
There's an old saying, I think it's attributed to Heraclitus maybe, or some old philosopher, somebody that wore a robe,
Way back when.
But there's a saying that no man walks through the same river twice. Mm. The water's always moving, and the human being is always changing. If the same people walk out the door at 5 p.m. and walk in the door the next day at 8 a.m., the organization has a problem. Because stagnation leads to death. And unfortunately, we live in a society right now where the professional development of most people in an organization has far outpaced their personal development. And yet it's that personal development, when the person becomes all they're capable of being, that really leads to growth in the professional sense, and that grows the organization. So businesses are quite literally better when their people become better, not just as employees, but as people. And this isn't a new idea. It may seem like an idea that all of a sudden has all this volume and is everywhere online, with talk about the Great Reset, the Great Resignation, and quiet quitting and such. But there are case studies going back to 1940s. A company in France was established by an individual who believed that the aim of an organization should be to fully develop the human being within it. And so in addition to making watches, that's what this particular company did, and they became quite good at it. They were at one point the 5th largest watchmaker in the world. In addition to making watches, this company offered classes in French language. They were based in France, in the French language, in physical fitness and movement, in what we today would call interpersonal communication. Back then they called it marriage and family problems. So we've advanced a whole lot
A
in
little
the
bit.
field of
Yeah.
branding when it comes to interpersonal communications.
Right.
But this was something that the company paid for and allotted time during the work week for these workers to engage in. And it did wonders for their engagement at work, for their retention in the job, and for their job satisfaction and happiness. And so while watches were the vehicle that brought everybody together, right, that provided the successful sale of watches, provided the profit, some of that profit was used and reinvested in its people, not just its employees, but its people.
Mm-hmm.
And those people don't just become better employees, they become better citizens, better community members, better mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, friends. We have a tremendous opportunity right now to take some of that precedent, let's call it, that organizations like this had done almost 100 years ago, and put it into practice on a massive scale. Because now we've got the internet, we've got video, we've got so many more methodologies and pathways to learning than they did back then. But very few organizations are actually taking advantage of this. They are still spending 98% of their learning and development budget on job-specific training.
Absolutely.
And people are opting out.
Mm-hmm.
People are saying, I don't even like the job I'm in. Why the hell do I want to get better at it? I want to get out of it. I want skills that get me somewhere else. And the old way of thinking about employee retention says, well, we don't want to invest in that. We don't want to spend all this money and then have our people leave. But I'd like you to consider the model of colleges and universities, right? Just as a thought experiment, because there are some differences for sure. What makes Harvard and Stanford and Princeton and UPenn, what makes them so valuable? Maybe it's the quality of education you get there, but I'd argue more people go there because of what happens when you get Harvard on your college degree.
Right.
Harvard is a great place to be from. What if more organizations tried to build themselves as great places to be from? What if by having your organization on someone's resume, they could open any door in your industry, any door in that field? And now all of a sudden you're creating this network of global brand ambassadors. But for working at your company, they would never have this dream job of theirs. How much loyalty and admiration and love do they have for your company? How likely are they to sing your praises to people that they meet? Because according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, people stay at an organization between 2 and 4 years, and it's trending more towards the 2.
Mm-hmm.
So people are going to leave. The question isn't how do we make them stay? The question is, what will they say about their time with us when they leave? Will they say, oh my God, I couldn't wait to get out of there? Or would they say, oh my God, I'm a better person because of the time I spent there?
Right. And they may actually miss and come back, because I think when you treat your employees well and you encourage them to do things outside of work, and like what you said, become a better person, the next day when they come back to work, chances are they're going to have a big smile on their face. It's going to be an authentic smile. They're going to be excited. And a lot of what you learn on the outside can apply to what you do on the inside, rather than having a really narrow focus. And sometimes, because what I have seen and personally experienced myself, is that there are some companies out there that want to limit what you do on the outside. And you actually have to sign agreements on what it is that you're allowed to do on the outside. So, and I think something like that, it doesn't breed a good company culture. And I think without a really good company culture, it's really hard, to have that growth model. So,
Well, you talked about, just a moment ago, I think you said something that's really important to focus back in on. And you said, when they come back the next day,
mhm.
well, that's really the challenge, isn't it? Is work a place you want to go back to?
Right.
Is that an experience that you want to have again?
Mm-hmm.
I would argue, and the research shows that most people don't feel that way. They don't want to go back. They feel they kind of have to go back because of
It's a paycheck.
obligations,
Right.
mortgage, car payments.
Right.
But what if work were a place? No. What if work were an experience
Mm.
that people wanted to have again? And that's what I encourage and what I help organizations, how I encourage them to think differently and what I help them operationalize, is this idea that we can create work as an experience to be something people want to participate in. And that's really, aside from my academic experience in the pursuit, my operational experience, right? My real life lived experience, 15 years working as a professional dueling and solo piano bar entertainer. My job was to create an experience that got strangers to become a choir, that unified all of these random people that just happened to be in this one place at this one time, and create an experience that made them want to come back and tell their friends and do it again and again and again. And there are principles, there are elements of that experience that can be replicated in the professional world. And I talk in my program, there are actually lots of examples that I share of organizations that have taken this principle or that principle and brought it into the corporate world. For example, one of the principles is creative autonomy.
Okay.
It's hard to argue that I'm not the musical expert in a piano bar. I mean, I'm the one who has the piano. Nobody else does. I'm the one who has the microphone. I'm the one they're paying to play music. I'm probably the best equipped to choose what songs are going to be enjoyable. But at a piano bar, it's not the musical expert. It's the audience.
Right.
It's the consumer of the
It's about them.
experience.
Yes.
Right, because it creates now a partnership. They're more engaged. How can we take that principle and apply it in the business world? Because even though technically one would assume the executives are the experts in the business, we would hope, the Peter principle may state otherwise, and that Peter principle is that people will ascend to their highest level of incompetence. But let's give everybody some credit and say that the executives are the experts in that particular business or industry. What would it look like if they created a request slip mechanism within their organization? If they developed a way for the ground level, the frontline employees, to create changes within the business, changes to how the customer is served, changes to how the work gets done. What the examples I share in my keynote show are that those businesses would succeed. Mm-hmm. They would experience wild success, improved employee retention, improved employee morale, improved job satisfaction. And it's a shift that really doesn't cost any money.
So how do you recommend, whether you're a small business or you're a really large company, how do you recommend for them to implement something like that?
It's going to be case by case, but I'd say just if you want to implement this idea of a request slip, start a suggestion box.
Okay.
I mean, start by giving your email to your employees and encourage them to email you when they have an idea, and then answer that email.
Right. Personally.
Personally. One organization does a really phenomenal job of connecting with every employee. Even though they have over 1,000 employees, they connect every employee with a CEO once a year. And so they do this in cohorts because it's a bigger organization now than it was when they first started. But in these groups of 8 or 10 or 12, they meet with the CEO for 30 minutes, and they don't talk business except for the last 5 minutes. The first 25 minutes is dedicated to learning something about each person on the call. The CEO wants to learn something personal about your family, about your hobbies, something you're excited about, something you're passionate about. Only in the last 5 minutes do they do a round robin, and it's really simple. They want to know what's something that we as a company have screwed up or can do better, and then what is something that I, as the CEO, as the leader, have screwed up or can do better. Okay. That's it. And if the employees don't feel comfortable sharing it on the call, they're encouraged to email the CEO, and he gets emails. But the beauty is what he does next. He doesn't just get the emails and send them off to some VP and say, thanks, we'll work on this. He responds to each employee. Thoughtful, individual response. And then he takes that information that was shared about their passions and their family and what's going on in their life. And his assistant helps compile that into what you and I might call a CRM. Mm-hmm. But effectively, it is a prompting system so that every day he gets about 6 or 8 prompts. Hey, Kathy's daughter had her ballet recital last week. So he sends an email and says, hey, Kathy, I was thinking about you. I know your daughter had her ballet recital last week. How did it go? Hope you're having a great week. That personal touch now creates the relationship. It creates the rapport for Kathy to say, it went great. Hey, by the way, I was thinking about our conversation and here's an idea. Because that's really where what makes the request slip work is the trust that's implicit in that relationship of the piano player and the bar attendee. That I'm not going to look at the request slip and go, hey, what idiot requested this song?
Right.
No, I want it to work just as much as you do. We're all in this for the experience. And so the beauty of that interaction is that it creates an individual relationship with each employee, creates a space for trust, and that creates a space for innovation.
Absolutely.
So that's a place where I think anybody can get started, whether you're a team of 2 or a team of 2,000.
I think that's actually something I call a connection campaign. You can use that in sales. You can use that obviously within companies as well, is having those moments where you're just reaching out to someone without a end goal in mind. You're just reaching out. Hey, I was just thinking about you today. Your name, you just popped in my mind. Just want to reach out just to see how are things going. Or I know it's your daughter's birthday. Tell her I said happy birthday. And then just be that. It's you're creating that connection. You're creating that relationship. And I would say relationship, whether it's within a company or with a potential client or a client, is worth probably more than anything that you do. Is worth more than the product. It's worth more than everything. And I think that in this day and age, that's skipped over a lot. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. I have a question because I saw that you created something called a tip jar culture. Is that similar to what you're talking about, or is that something different? I don't know exactly what that is.
So the tip jar culture is, or I should say, what I was just talking about is an element of the tip jar culture. If you think about what really differentiates a piano bar from any other type of musical experience, it's the tip jar. It's that opportunity for an individual to provide discretionary incentive for a discretionary output. Meaning I don't have to play your request. I'm paid a shift pay to be here. In fact, we joke at the piano bar and say that, if you bring up a request slip without something green and presidential, some money, then it's just a suggestion. So and this is one of the second principles, is this idea of gain sharing. What is my incentive as an employee to be more engaged? What's in it for me? Mm-hmm. Where's the gain share if I am more productive? Where's the gain share if I innovate? And in fact, you can see this problem present itself on construction sites all over the country. And my dad was a carpenter, and so I grew up, kind of going to construction sites every once in a while with my dad, putting on my kid steel toe boots and the little Fisher-Price tool belt, and pretending that I was a construction worker too that day. And the thing about construction workers is they're paid per hour, not per project. So what's the incentive to frame that wall faster? And in fact, when you're new on a construction site, you learn about the rhythm of the crew. Mm-hmm. That crew has a rhythm and a pace, and there is no incentive for you to go faster. That's disappointing. And especially if you're a new home buyer waiting on your new construction to be finished, you know the pain of that disappointment. I mean, these things take forever. So what if we could devise a way to pay the laborer per project, but maybe pay the foreman or the safety inspector per hour so that there's a bit of a check and a balance, right? The frontline crew are trying to get it done faster. They're trying to innovate. And the middle management is saying, let's slow down and make sure we do it right. And when we meet in the middle, we'll have a bit of a faster pace. I mean, God, think about what would happen if this were in place for road crews. Maybe 95 would actually be completed.
That's right.
At
It would
some
be
point
done
our
in a month
lifetime,
instead of a year, right?
But so this is another challenge to organizations is how do we create gain sharing opportunities? Because if you made a request at a piano bar and I said, okay, you know what, Kathy, come on up to the front. And I put headphones on you and you were the only person to hear it, how excited would everybody else be? What would that experience be like at the bar for everybody else? They'd be like, well, this is 3 minutes of my life I'll never get back. When's he going to play my request? They'd all be waiting. When is it going to get to the part about me? They would say. And employees feel the same way because somebody is reaping the benefits of that increased efficiency, that increased effort, that engagement they're putting out. But if it's not me, who cares? And I don't think anyone with a straight face that's in a leadership role can look at me and say, well, it shouldn't be that way, because that is literally the definition of capitalism. It's literally the definition. If I do more, I should get more. Why is that not celebrated in organizations? You know, you and I were talking before. I've got a salesperson and I tell her, I can't wait to write you 5-figure commission checks. I can't wait.
Right. Exactly.
And yet there's this conflict in the corporate world about paying people more. Why? See, the problem is it's difficult for, maybe non-sales people. It's difficult. Let's take a receptionist. How do we construe extra value for him or her? How does someone who's a receptionist add more value? That's on the management to figure out, but they've got to figure it out because people are abandoning the traditional work experience for the gig economy because that allows them freedom, flexibility, and discretionary incentive. And so what's funny as a musician, I got curious about this word gig. Like where did it come from? The hell does it even mean? Gig.
Right.
Turns out gig wasn't even really a word until the 1920s. It wasn't really, you can use Google Ngram to see the popularity of words and so, because I'm a nerd, so I did that. And it was really around the 20s that the word gig started to become popularized. And I thought, wonder why. Turns out that gig was used by jazz musicians. When jazz musicians would book a performance at a particular jazz bar or club, they'd say, oh, I got a gig. Do you know what word they used prior to 1920?
What was that?
Engagement.
Oh, there you
Gig
go.
is short for the word engagement. And so quite literally, people are opting out of the traditional workforce for the engagement economy. We crave engagement. We want to be engaged. And it's a responsibility of leaders, it's a responsibility of organizations to create an environment, an experience that people want to engage with. And that's what the tip jar culture is all about, is creating an experience that people want to have again and again and again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's just one more point that I almost want to add to that because I just spent the weekend in Nashville. So there were a lot of performers, amazing performers. I think when you give the tip too, there's a portion of that. It's a gratitude. And I think for management, when you give the feedback or whatever it might be, it's really almost like your people are giving you some gratitude for your openness to listen, which I think is really, really important in this day and age.
Yeah, people want to be connected. I mean, that's an element that I don't talk a lot about in the program, but yes, the tip is gratitude, but there's also that experience of seeing the finished product, where the attendee or the audience member can see me perform. They get to see what their money just bought. And I get to see how they respond and react to it. And I think that disconnection between the frontline employee and the end product, right? So a Harvard professor whose name is escaping me coined this phrase initially, which is that people don't want a 1/4-inch drill. People want a 1/4-inch hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Clayton Christensen, another Harvard professor, sort of operationalized it and called it the job to be done. It's not what I do, it's what happens when I do what I do that I want to be connected with.
Yep.
And that's another tool that organizations can use to create a more engaging experience, is to connect their people with the outcome, which we so often don't get to see.
Oh my gosh. So true. Well, I know that I have like a gazillion questions I could ask you. So I think what we're going to need to do is we'll need to have you come back for another show. I just want to ask, where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks for that. You can go to my website, gregoryoffner.com, or if you're on the gram, if you're on Instagram or on Twitter, I'm at Gregory Offner Jr. for Junior. So Gregory Offner Jr. Connect with me, come say hi. And
I love that. Love that. And is Offner spelled Offner for all of you that are just listening, not viewing. So again, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. And like I said, I have so much that I could talk to you about. I'd love to have you back in the
oh,
future.
that'd be awesome.
Yes,
That'd be
but
awesome.
thanks
Thank you,
again,
Kathy.
Greg.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So wasn't Gregory really great? I mean, he really talked about how important it is to have employee growth, to focus on the growth of your employee, whether or not you're a company that has one employee, two employees, or if you're this really big corporation. So he really gave us a lot of food for thought. So thank you again for joining into the Professional Rule Breaker. And hey, if you liked this show, this podcast, go ahead and give us a 5-star review and make sure that you join us for the next episode.